Okay, just a little bit of background about the Precipice Fund. It was established in 2013. The lead funder, as I mentioned, is the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts. They started a regranting program that's now in over 37 cities. We're aiming to hit 50. Um, the administrator in Portland is PICA, and the amount of grants that we give are between $500 and $5,000 each. And they go to unincorporated organizations, artist projects, etc., in the Portland metropolitan area. Uh, the primary goal of the Precipice Fund is as such. In recognizing the barriers of funding faced by independent artist projects and collectives, the intention of the Precipice Fund is to support unincorporated, collaborative visual art in Portland, Oregon, and its adjacent suburbs, particularly projects that serve to support other local artists and to enrich the region's broader arts ecology. We encourage applications from first-time grant writers, artists from underrepresented communities, and artists and projects that reflect the region's diversity of cultures, identities, aesthetics, and contemporary creative practices. If any of those terms up there, especially unincorporated, are confusing you, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it in the presentation. Also, just a reminder to those who joined a little late, you can put your questions in the chat. I'm running this alone today, so I'm doing both the presentation and the admin side. So I'll do my best to get to the questions at the end of the presentation. What do we mean by unincorporated? So unincorporated means it's not a federally registered 401c3 nonprofit. It is not a commercial or for-profit business. Exceptions, rare but noteworthy, are sometimes a nonprofit is only registered in Oregon, a state level registered nonprofit. They are eligible. LLCs are eligible if the primary purpose is not for profit enterprise. So if it's an independent artist run space with an LLC for insurance liability, you're eligible. But a for-profit commercial gallery is not. Now, there is some nuance there as well. Part of why this exists, especially from the Warhol Foundation, they set this rule, is that they fund registered 501c3 nonprofits. So they're not interested in a nonprofit getting more funding through this grant. They really want this money to go directly to artists, and they can't do that as a foundation. It's not in their bylaws to give directly to artists. They give through organizations, they do pass-throughs, they fund creative capital, who then funds directly artists. So that's how they get around that. So that's why that is there. Now, you might write a proposal that is partnering with a community organization, a social service organization, maybe even an arts nonprofit, where you're going to borrow their space or use some of their equipment, or maybe your organization is housed inside of their building. That's also okay. What is, I'm going to use the word not okay, but there again, there's nuance there, is for that organization to adopt your program as their programming. Again, that would be seen as that they're benefiting off of your grant, your labor, your producing. So we'll talk about a couple of projects that received the Precipice Fund awards, and they will kind of illustrate some of these things that we're talking about in terms of the guidelines of the grant. You also can find, 12 rounds of descriptions of projects that have been funded on the Precipice Fund website. So if you're ever just looking for ideas or want to see the kinds of projects that were funded or the kind of language that was used, feel free to poke around on the website. So this project was called Transformative Justice, Films for the Future by Sensory Organizing Project. The artists were Riley King, C. Mason, Christopher Melton, and Anna Swanson. You could see here that they're running some workshops. They're doing some work outdoors. And Sensory Organizing Project was, I think, a fledgling radical queer video art collective using experimental documentary filmmaking to amplify political organizing work around Portland. They provided low to no cost, non-commercial video documentation for activists, supporting communities and authoring their own media narratives. We also pursue longer form creative projects, including our current film series, Transformative Justice, which interweaves suppressed narratives of Portland communities most affected by systemic oppression. So here, this project is collaborative. It's working outside of traditional systems. It's serving artists and communities in Portland, and it's doing so through the lens of visual art in terms of it being a video art collective and that they work in experimental documentary filmmaking. What does collaborative mean in this case? To be eligible, a project cannot be a solo artist project. So there are grants that do direct artist funding in the region for solo artist projects. The Precipice Fund is for collaborative projects. So the project must involve at least 2 artists in its organization, production, and presentation. When you're filling out the grant, one of the collaborators will have to identify themselves as the primary contact. What that means is they are the person that we email about questions about their grant. We're the one that we contact when you're awarded the grant and talk about how to distribute money and how to write a contract. And one of the things that we do that's kind of unusual with the grant is that normally the primary contact on a grant is the one that's solely responsible for all of the finances of the project. In the case of Precipice, we can divide up the money across different collaborators. Some of that is to release the tax burden on just one artist, and some of it is so that multiple artists in the collective can distribute funds, buy materials, pay artists, pay themselves, et cetera, and so forth. Another project that was funded in the past was First Brick, and the artists were Molly Alloy, Alan Carpenter, James Knowlton, and Eric Long. Their project was an all-queer curatorial practice and collaboration that worked to create non-dogmatic spaces that are constantly in flux in location and practice. They used a lot of alternative locations. You saw that was like a backyard festival that they ran. They pair emerging and seasoned artists with an emphasis on contemporary practice and work that provokes critical dynamic discussion. And they proposed a series of events, some of them like the festival we saw, and some were more standard exhibitions in gallery spaces. What's visual art? I think this is the most dynamic, amoebic definition that's constantly evolving. The Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Art primarily funds visual art. As we all know, visual art is an expanded practice and includes lots of different mediums and methods. Some of this feels redundant to say, but somehow we have to go through it. Projects must be rooted or strongly related to visual art. And we have an expansive definition of that. Sound art is eligible. Film and video are eligible. Experimental film festivals and microcinemas have been successfully funded. Proposals to produce film or video are only eligible in their creation phase. A lot of people who work in more mainstream film production are very used to seeking post-production and distribution funding. This grant is not for that. Those grants have not been successful. It should reflect a visual art informed practice rather than a feature film or independent film industry type style. Performance art that clearly demonstrates a visual art lineage connection is eligible. I think that can be confusing for people who work across theater and dance and other modalities of the performing arts. I think we understand that those visual art and performing arts bump up against each other, but the space that they kind of interact, I think, would be defined as performance art, work that's durational, body-based, that has more of ties to history of visual art and performance art. With that said, I'll talk about a project that was put forth by a group of people that are primarily known as dancers that was successful in getting a Precipice Fund. Other artistic forms, dance, theater, music, writing, etc., are only eligible if applicants clearly demonstrate that visual art is at the core component of their material contents. So the project that I was just referencing is physical education, or PE. They just, through a successful Precipice funded project called the Say When Festival. They've also put forth other projects over the years. Physical education is an artist collaborative made up of Kian Gaskin, Ali Hankins, Taka Yamamoto, and Lu Yim. I would say that Ali, Taka, and Lu all have visual art practices as well, but they're primarily known as dancers, and they really are approaching even their applications from that point of view. But they're very clear in their applications that they're making programming to introduce notions of embodiment and dance and performance to artists working across all fields, and particularly coming out of a visual art tradition of like critical theory and other practices. So they've ran like lecture series and workshop discussions, workshops for visual artists about embodied practice, and presented installations and other video work and other things that kind of cross over in genres. There's a long description about who they are that you can find on their website, but I'll just say here that PE acknowledges and scrutinizes the perceived illegibility and messiness of the performing body. They organize and host reading groups, lectures, curated performance, aerobics movement classes, and straight out dance parties. And that here's this critical line: PE's motivation is to inspire critical dialogue between individuals of varying mediums and practices while deepening their connection to performance and their sense of embodiment. What is a project? This concept is broad, and if it meets core eligibility criteria, a project might take the form of a curated exhibition, program, or a series of events, a one-off artistic project, a publication, a festival, a website or online project, a residency program, workshops or other learning opportunities by and for artists, operations or ongoing programming of an independent, unincorporated, artist-run space. Again, I think the best way to kind of think about what projects are eligible is to go to the multiple rounds of funding on the website and check out what's been funded. I'll also mention that myself and other staff members at PICA are not on the panels. We bring in an independent group of panelists. Some have received Precipice funding in the past. Some are curators or culture workers from inside and outside of the region. And that panel dynamic really is what makes up who gets the grants in the end. And they're very thoughtful, and we select them for their kind of understanding and knowledge of experimental practice, contemporary art practice, community engagement, and all of the things that make up the Precipice Fund mandate. One of the other projects I want to talk about is the Monday Salon at Living School of Art, which was a project by Amanda Evans, Eunice Tapia, and Natalia Zakahira. And that project ran for many years, from 2016 to 21. And it was an intergenerational, neighbor-led social practice artwork located within a pre-existing 120-unit affordable housing apartment in East Portland. They ran ceramics workshops, had food and art-based lecture projects. They did gardening. And this was a very successful project that ran for many, many years. What about this idea of a primary contact and your collaborators? One project collaborator must apply as the primary contact. I explained this before. They serve as the main communications point during the application and granting process. They are not a project's lead artist, and the primary contact and collaborators are considered equal artist applicants and grantees. So what that means is, going back to that idea of of promoting or funding a solo artist practice. If this is your practice and your project and you're just getting collaborators to facilitate your individualistic project, that application probably will not be successful. This project and the Precipice Fund really fund things that are collaborative in nature and are serving many different artists in different communities. Primary contacts must reside in Portland or adjacent Oregon suburbs. They cannot be a Washington state resident. Collaborators may be based anywhere in the world. In addition to the primary contact applicant, you should list all of your collaborators in the application. Collaborators share organizing or coordinating responsibility for the project. So let's say you're putting a proposal in, Jody, to run your garage gallery space with your partner, and that means both you and your partner would be listed as the primary, as the collaborators. One of you would be listed as the primary contact, and the artists that you were serving by giving them exhibitions or offering them space, they would be seen as parts of your program. They would not be listed as collaborators on the project. Any individual may only submit one application as the primary contact per grant cycle, but they can serve as a collaborator on any number of applications. So this one can be a funny one because Portland and the surrounding communities, it's a small community. So you may be part of 3 artist collaboratives or be invited to be in a show at a gallery that gets a Precipice Fund, but you've also put in a project of your own. And that's okay. You're not going to be penalized for that. But we talk about this spirit of community over competition in this grant quite a bit. So, don't be a grant hog. Don't put in 45 applications, trying to hack the system. This grant has $60,000 to give. We give every cent of it away, and we're really trying to get it to a diversity of projects. So think about your personal capacity and how many projects you can sign on to, because they might all get funded. That happened one year, and an artist was on 4 different projects in one year. So think about your personal capacity, and also think about the context outside of your project and all the other artists that are going to apply for this and how you also want them to get funding too. You can apply if you're a student. You must be over 18. What does Portland mean? This is that question for the individual in Forest Grove. Round 13, a Precipice Fund will support projects taking place in or near Portland, Oregon, the city proper and adjacent suburbs that serve this area's artistic communities. The primary contact on the project must reside in Portland or an adjacent suburb and in the state of Oregon. To ensure that at least one grantee is based in the Precipice Fund's target region and the primary contact is easily reachable through the application and grant making process. As I mentioned, collaborators can be based anywhere, but I will say that people on the panel are really thinking about what this means for a localized region and how the composite of the different projects interact with each other and create a constellation of activity around the city and the surrounding suburbs. If you have an international collaborator, that's fine. The one thing that you should talk to them about is how they want to receive money, because that can be complicated. There are international tax laws that make us take funds out of their payment. So if you're collaborating with an artist internationally, you may want to even keep them in the grant in a different capacity and pay them through your own award. So this is something I'd like to talk about that we haven't put in the presentation before, but it's come up a lot in the panel discussions. So, and at the Warhol Foundation itself. We have previously not collected a lot of demographic information in our grant, but the Warhol Foundation is seeking to understand who the regional regranting organizations are serving, what you care about, what cultural and lived experiences you've had. If all demographic information on the Precipice Fund application is pulled from this year, is pulled from a new set of designations that the Warhol Foundation has made. It is volunteer to give this information. You do not have to give it. If you do give it, the way it's going to be used is turned over to them to understand how to serve the different communities that they're funding. If your project names or is working with or centers work around a particular cultural group or subjectivity, please consider what is your lived or learned experience or proximity to this culture, who you're partnering with, and whether those partnerships are secured or not. I'll give some examples that have perked the ears of panelists before and have caused applications not to be funded. Projects that are working around different racial politics, but don't have anyone from that race listed as a collaborator or a primary contact. Projects that talk about working with the land or indigenous communities and name indigenous organizations, but don't have relationships with those organizations, haven't secured a contact. Working in all communities takes deep levels of trust and personal relationships. So it's okay to have something be, a hopeful vision you want for your project. Like, we would like to connect with Naya and work with them around the waterways that they are investigating in their own workshops and agricultural initiatives. But if you do put that in, it is helpful in your grant to say, and we have talked to this person at Naya, and they are interested in collaborating with us if we get this grant. So at least take that step to kind of name the people that you're working with. And if you're working underneath centering a particular cultural identity, people within your project should share that cultural identity. A little bit of some tips as you go through the application, what it means to be clear. Really think about what is the essence of your project. Speak in your own voice. You don't have to write in some, academic art language to be successful in this grant. Speak plainly, talk passionately from your perspective, talk about the drive behind the project, really elucidate how it is collaborative, how you're working together with your partners or various communities. Pay attention to the details. We've had people apply, let's say, for a podcast, and they say they're going to do a series of 5 podcasts, but they don't list what the subject of those podcasts are or who might be involved. Again, it's not critical to have everybody confirmed, but when you write a list of artists out and include information about who they are in your proposal, it makes it stronger. If you are hopeful about collaborating with somebody, that's one thing. The project should be, can be projected or confirmed, but you should plan and you should talk to those hopeful collaborators in the community before you write them in your grant. Remember, is your project rooted in visual art practice? One of the ways, the subversive ways to deal with that, if you mainly work in performance or another field, is to think about the language you use in the grant and to really talk about how your project relates to visual art practice or how you're considering it. I am also can't see the bottom sentence because of the captioning bubble. Would somebody else read it out for the group?
Yeah, it says, is your budget ethical and is your project properly scaled?
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So is your budget ethical? What that means is, are you paying your artists a little something? Are you paying yourself? Are you talking about how the money is being used? And then is your project properly scaled? The Precipice Fund is really exciting, fun, and it funds a lot of really ambitious projects. We don't want you to tamper down your ambition, but you also do not need to create a circus. We have had projects that are like, we're going to start a gallery program, and we're going to make publications, and we're going to have a lecture series, and we're going to have a community potluck, and. This grant is only $500 to $5,000. Just being frank, there is not enough money in the world to fund all of the ideas of artists. And we are already critically underfunded, stressed, overworked, and dealing with, the insane world that we're in. So really write the project for a very specific set of things that you want to do. Think about your capacity, the capacity of the collaborators. Think about the artistic excellence of the project. You don't have to put every single thing in this project. There'll be other opportunities to apply, and just do something, properly scaled to what you can handle. We don't want burnout to be a part of your grant award. We want you to use the money well, and we want it to buoy you and not take you down. Okay, so the application process. We open the application on the 19th, and the application closes on October 1st. Portland is a famous last minute town. I myself am writing grants right now that are due in 2 days. So I understand what that's about, but do not wait till Tuesday, October 1st at 11:59 to post your application. Precipice Fund staff, myself and Elle, will be able to answer questions that you have up until a few days before that date. But on that Tuesday, the 24th, if you experience technical problems or have a question about your grant, you can reach out to Submittable, which is our application platform, but we will not be available to assist. So please, mark your calendar a week back from that date and trick yourself that that's the absolute deadline, and then procrastinate all you want until you get to that date, and submit it a little bit before, so we can help you if there's issues with how you submit on Submittable, or if we read the grant and have a question for you, we'll come back to you and allow you to make changes. We want you to succeed. So we use an online application system called Submittable. Detailed instructions are provided throughout, and the submission platform provides tech support. It's a really easy platform to use, but again, if you have any problems with it, myself and Elle are available to answer those questions up until a few days before October 1st. Who should complete the application? Anyone in the collaborative can complete the application. I would recommend that you write your answers to the questions outside of the Submittable platform, edit it together, but that one person is in charge of putting it in the Submittable platform and making it all go well. Too many cooks in the kitchen can cause a lot of problems when you're submitting the application. In the application, we request a project title and a brief summary. We ask for your concept and goals. We ask you to list a possible site or venue. This cannot be pica. So many people write pica in their grant and have not spoken to us about it. And that is one rule that the foundation has for all re-granting organizations, that they can't be the presenter of the project that's submitted through Precipice. Make sure to outline your timeline. And there are a few narrative responses that will help you explain the project's public component, its intended audience, and its support of local artists. And we ask for bios of all collaborators. We require some visual support material. It is helpful if you write descriptions and explanations of what we're looking at in a photo. We ask for 6 high quality uploaded images and optional 2 videos or audio samples. And there is a budget form as well. The budget form auto calculates, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And it has a lot of preordained fields, but you can change the sections. Like if you're not doing any printing, but you need a section that is for hot air balloon costs, you can change it in that budget and add that in. I'll also say that sometimes, because you're involved in a future vision of a project and you don't have images of what it's going to look like, put images of other projects that your collaborators have been involved in or the artists that you're working in, or make a video describing what it's going to be like. Do give us some visuals to look at that help tell us who's involved in the project, even if their project is going to be completed the following year and it doesn't exist yet. Selection criteria. The projects have to be submitted on time. We don't take any late applications for any reason. They have to meet the minimum eligibility requirements, which we've gone through, but they exist on the Precipice Fund website. The main selection criteria is artistic strength. I think that the panelists are really interested in learning about what you want to do, what's needed, what you think is needed in the community, and what artists you're excited about working with or presenting. The feasibility is looked at. They think about the capacity to carry out and complete the project within the grant period. So that again is about making a scalable project. Are you taking on too much for the kind of funding you're seeking? And they also are thinking about public and community engagement, what the access is, what the commitment is to share it with the community, and the potential for it to serve artists. What I'll say there is that I think in a lot of grants, when people use the word like, how does something serve the community? It's a code for how does it serve underrepresented communities. And that is not what this is. This is about serving a community that you designate that you think will interact with your project. Like, it's about where you live, it's about the artists you interact with, it's about the cultural context you exist in. So in terms of, we don't need you to lie and say that you're going to reach all of the children of Portland with your project. We just need you to talk about who the community is that you serve with your project and who you aim to engage with. That doesn't mean being lazy and it's just 5 of your friends at an opening. We do want to see outreach and engagement efforts built into the projects, but you don't have to become something you're not. Review and selection process. Like I said, we invite an external panel of 3 to 4 local and national visual artists and art workers. We are not a part of the review panel. Notification. We will convene the panel the week of November 11th this year. And then we have to go back, do a lot of administrative work, look at the budget. And then sometimes we're able to let people know that they've received the grant or that they were not successful this time and should apply next round in right after the panel. And sometimes we need a couple of weeks. So we will be letting you know mid to late November. And then we announce the grants publicly. I think the event this year is going to be on December 7th at a Precipice Award ceremony where all the applicants are invited, past grantees, culture workers and artists in town, and general audience. And it's a really great party. And whether or not you receive the grant or not, I highly recommend coming because you get to hear about the projects that were funded. And I guarantee you, if you weren't funded, you're going to be able to tap in to one of the ones that was. And then by next year, you can apply again, and those projects are not eligible to apply again. And so you'll have another chance. So if you were funded last year from the Precipice Fund, you are not eligible to apply again. That only means if you were a primary contact or main collaborator in a project. If you were an artist presenting, let's say, in an artist space that got a Precipice Award, you still can apply with your own project. Money. We award between $500 and $5,000. Occasionally, as the panel is trying to award the most amount of projects, they will look at a project that asks for $5,000 and give it $4,500 so that they can give another $500 to another project and fit people in. But we really discourage taking down the budget of a project too much because we don't want it to be underfunded. Announcements of the grantees happen in December, and we distribute the funds in early January, so January of 2025. For the budget, we have a budget form. It's auto-calculated to do the math for you and catch errors. You can upload an MS Excel or PDF version of the form. If you don't have Excel, you can use Google Sheets and then transfer it to one of those other formats. Again, I just want to note that you should pay yourself, meaning the main collaborators should pay themselves, or if you don't, you should write in the narrative why you can abstain from taking payment and why you're putting it into other places, and pay the artists that you invite. Again, that can be in a small honorarium, it could be in trade, it can be in a variety of ways, but just please talk about that in your narrative and in represent it in the budget. What are in-kind expenses? If you're not familiar with that term, that means that let's say you got rent donated from a storefront in downtown Portland, they could tell you the value of that storefront and you could list it in your grant as an in-kind donation. Or if somebody gives you printing services or another kind of professional service or materials, value that and put it in as in-kind expenses. It is not required for you to have in-kind donations for your grant to be successful, but it is something that many of the grantees include because not always can the Precipice Fund be the only sole source of funding for a project. You need to maybe do other fundraising or get donations of materials and time from other people. Account for other forms of income. If you're applying for another grant, like you're applying for a grant from the Oregon Arts Commission or RAC, or you have an individual donor that's going to give you money, you could list that in as an anticipated amount of money and or a confirmed amount of money. And the income must match expenses. That will work itself out in the budget form if you fill out these categories. The math will math. Right size your budget. I've already talked about that. Keep in mind the values of the community, collaboration, and mutual support. We ask you to consider how your proposal budget affects the larger applicant pool. If each applicant group budgets for what is truly needed, we can ensure a broader distribution of funds. And here's a couple of examples of budgets. I never think in this PowerPoint presentation in a Zoom, this is very helpful because it's so tiny, but it does give you a look at what the budget form looks like. And you can see that the Tiny Artist Residency has filled out these categories. They have an artist fee of $2,700. They're offering per diem to the artists because those artists were traveling. They're paying for travel for the artists, and they're offering housing at $150. Now, part of the reason that this is listed in here as only $150 is the person who ran this residency had a space that they could donate, and they just put in the grant the cost of cleaning. And then there's a line item for materials and supplies and printing, et cetera. It all adds up to $5,000. And this was a successful application. They were awarded that money. Uzine Comics and Zine Festival, an example of kind of a larger event. And they paid themselves for the co-organizers and volunteers. They gave stipends. They had various materials and venue rental fee. And then in their income, they list that they are hoping to get the Precipice Fund grant for $4,000. They're hoping to make tabling fees of $2,200. They have some business sponsors. They have some in-kind here. And then they kind of total that all up for their ask. What's your responsibility if you get this grant? We expect prompt communication with the Precipice Fund staff if we reach out to you and tell you that you've gotten the grant. We want to hear from you. We want to start doing the contract process. We ask for financial accountability, the approximate spending as proposed in the budget. We are not going to go over every single receipt you spend. Budgets change radically during the course of a project, but we want to see that the project is completed and that you paid your artists. And believe me, we will hear about it if you don't. Submission of a brief project summary by the end of the grant period. That's just our way of reporting back to the Warhol Foundation about what happened with the grant. And we ask you to submit some images. And by that time, you're so happy about your project, you want to share about it. Any tax liability is your own, incurred from grant income. We can't give any tax advice, but to mitigate tax burden on one applicant, Precipice Fund, grant monies can be distributed across your collaborators. Just to go over the deadlines again, and then I can look at the chat and see about any questions. The application opened on August 19th, so it's up there now. It closes on October 1st. Please make your own personal due date a week before that so we can help you with any questions. We'll review the applications in mid-November, and then we'll notify right after that. And then early in 2025, we will distribute the funds. And then on December 31st, 2025, all round 13 projects must be complete. I'm somebody you can contact with questions. Elle, who is not here today because they're out on vacation, you can reach them at precipice@pica.org. And I would suggest that that's the main email you should write. Elle will forward me every single one of those emails. If you need to reach out to me directly for some reason, it's something private, you don't want another staff member reading it, you can use my email, kristen@pica.org. The website is there. It's easy to find if you just do a Google search, Precipice Fund, pica.org, where all the other past projects are listed. And the Andy Warhol Foundation also has all of their other regranting programs listed on their website. And you can go to those regranting programs and look at what was funded in those cities. And that also might help you round out the grant language for your project. Okay.